Wikileaks founder, Australian journalist Julian Assange, has been held in captivity in Belmarsh Prison in England since 2019. This after he had been provided asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012, before being literally dragged away to Belmarsh in 2019. He has been charged with playing a major role in releasing classified and non-classified information, including video, also documents that, according to the U.S. Justice Department, contained the unredacted names of human sources who provided information to U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan and the U.S. State Department diplomats around the world, seen as a risk to national security. His wife, Stella Assange, has stated that extraditing Julian from the British prison to the United States would be another attempt to blow a major hole through the United States' First Amendment protections concerning freedom of speech. She wouldn't expect Julian to get a fair trial in the United States. The final hearings scheduled for February 20th and 21st, 2024 are the last opportunities for Julian Assange to avoid extradition to the United States. Stella is asking that U.S. citizens call their congressional reps and sign on to House Resolution 934, which states, expressing the sense of the House of Representatives that regular journalistic activities are protected under the First Amendment and that the United States ought to drop all charges against and attempts to extradite Julian Assange.
It's been reported that Wikileaks, your baby, has, in the last few years, has released more classified documents than the rest of the world's media combined. Can that possibly be true?
Yeah, can it possibly be true? It's a worry, isn't it? That the rest of the world's media is doing such a bad job that a little group of activists is able to release more of that type of information than the rest of the world press combined.
How does it work? How do people release the documents, and how do you secure their privacy?
Well, so these are, as far as we can tell, classical whistleblowers. And we have a number of ways for them to get information to us. So we use this state-of-the-art encryption to bounce stuff around the internet to hide trails, pass it through legal jurisdictions like Sweden and Belgium to enact those legal protections. We get information in the mail, the regular postal mail, encrypted or not, vet it like a regular news organization, format it, which is sometimes something that's quite hard to do when you're talking about giant databases of information, release it to the public, and then defend ourselves against the inevitable legal and political attacks.
So you make an effort to ensure the documents are legitimate, but you actually almost never know who the identity of the source is.
That's right.
Is.
Yeah, very rarely do we ever know. And if we find out at some stage, then we destroy that information as soon as possible.
We're going to just show a short clip from this Baghdad airstrike video. The video itself is longer, but here's a short clip. This is intense material, I should warn you.
Once you get on, just open off. Yeah, Roger. I see your element. You got about 4 Humvees right along this. You're clear. All right, firing. Line here. When the state line, let me know when you have it. Or shoot. Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shoot. Keep shoot.
Bushmaster 2-6. Bushmaster 2-6. We need to move time now.
All right, we just engaged all 8 individuals. Yeah, we got 2 birds. We're still firing. Roger. Got him.
6 is a 2-6. We'll move, but we got that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on
bypass.
God damn it, Kyle. All right. I hit him by head.
So, what was the impact of that?
The impact on the people who worked on it was severe. We ended up sending 2 people to Baghdad to further research that story. So this is just the first of 3 attacks that occur in that scene.
I mean, 11 people died in that attack, right? Including 2 Reuters employees.
Yeah, 2 Reuters employees, 2 young children were wounded. There were between 18 and 26 people killed altogether.
And releasing this caused widespread outrage. What was the key element of this that actually caused the outrage, do you think?
I don't know. I guess people can see the gross disparity in force. You have a guy walking in a relaxed way down the street, and then a Apache helicopter sitting up at 1 kilometre firing 30mm cannon shells on everyone, looking for any excuse to do so, and killing people, rescuing the wounded. And there was 2 journalists involved who clearly weren't insurgents because that's their full-time job.
I mean, there's been this US intelligence analyst, Bradley Manning, arrested, and it's alleged that he confessed in a chat room to have leaked this video to you, along with 280,000 classified US embassy cables. I mean, did he?
Well, we have denied receiving those cables. He has been charged about 5 days ago with obtaining 150,000 cables and releasing 50. We have released early in the year a cable from the Reykjavik US Embassy, but this is not necessarily connected. I mean, I was a known visitor of that embassy.
I mean, if you did receive thousands of US Embassy diplomatic cables...
We would have released them. Yeah.
You would?
Yeah.
Because?
Well, because these sort of things reveal what the true state of... say, Arab governments are like, the true human rights abuses in those governments. If you look at declassified cables, that's the sort of material that's there.
So let's talk a little more broadly about this. I mean, in general, what's your philosophy? Why is it right to encourage leaking of secret information?
Yeah, well, there's a question as to what sort of information is important in the world. What sort of information can achieve reform? And there's a lot of information. So information that organizations are spending economic effort into concealing, that's a really good signal that when the information gets out, there's a hope of it doing some good. Because the organizations that know it best, that know it from the inside out, are spending work to conceal it. And that's what we've found in practice, and that's what the history of journalism is.
But are there risks with that, either to the individuals concerned or indeed to society at large, where leaking can actually have an unintended consequence?
Yeah, not that we've seen anything we've released. I mean, we have a harm minimization policy. We have a way of dealing with information that has sort of personally identifying information in it. But there are legitimate secrets. You know, your records with your doctor, that's a legitimate secret. But we deal with whistleblowers that are coming forward that are really sort of well motivated.
It should really be Julian here. Most of you will know that Julian is in a high-security prison, and he's been there since the 11th of April 2019. I was thinking about how to talk about freeing Julian here. And Julian told me, he explained Bitcoin to me back in 2011. So he explained the technology behind it, but he also gave me a big picture understanding of the significance of Bitcoin. And I'll go into the 2 things that he said about Bitcoin. I think it is also a pathway to understanding the kind of parallel tracks of Wikileaks and Bitcoin, and the future of Bitcoin and how that's tied to what's being done to Julian. So the first thing that Julian has said about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin breaks Orwell's dictum. He who controls the present controls the past, and he who controls the past controls the future. Bitcoin technology, rather. And that in that sense, Bitcoin and the Bitcoin technology are trying to fight censorship in a very similar way to the way Wikileaks has fought censorship using cryptography. As you know, Julian started Wikileaks with incredible innovation. He was an incredible pioneer.
About 300 people gathered outside the British consulate in New York City to voice their support for imprisoned Wikileaks publisher Julian Assange. Among the speakers were rock legend Roger Waters from Pink Floyd and Max Blumenthal, the founder and editor of the Grayzone.
I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great if the holidays were free of our attachments to competing deities or their disciples or prophets, and could simply be a seasonable expression of general thanks to no one in particular for the bounty that this beautiful planet bestows upon us poor sinners. And thank you, madam. I don't know, somebody chuckled. She's nice. And maybe even a celebration of our potential to look after one another. Paragraph. What's this got to do with Julian Assange? I hear you say. Well, actually, everything. Bear with me, I'll get there. Ever since the persecution of Julian Assange started in 2010, or whenever it was, I've been boiling with rage. Finally, someone was providing we the people with a hitherto absent public service, namely telling us the truth about what was really going on in the corridors of power and the theatres of war. The persecution has been going on for so long, it could have been hard to maintain our rage had not the smear campaign against Julian been enraging and diabolical and so constant. So the rage is still there, boiling away. But I'm going to digress and talk for a minute about hope. 5 years ago, in October 2017, during a tour of North America, I did a Q&A in Vancouver. And it was co-hosted by two charming ladies of different faiths. One, a Jewish lady, and one Muslim. We had a good talk. At the end, the Jewish lady asked me a final question. She said, "What gives you hope?" she said. "Isn't the human heart a remarkable organ?" Mine, in that moment, that evening in Vancouver 2017, took me back to a morning in New York City 15 years earlier, in 2002. I was with an old friend, a man called Etienne Rodagil, a great French lyricist who I was working with on Sa Ira, an opera about the French Revolution. I will get there, of course. We had stopped for breakfast and sat in a patch of morning sun at a table on the sidewalk outside a bar on 54th Street. I had an espresso. Etienne had a famous grouse, a large one, and opened a packet of Benson and Hedges cigarettes. We chatted, the usual breakfast small talk, you know, the meaning of life, that sort of thing that Frenchmen do. Oh, sorry. Etienne took a few deep drags on his second or third Benson and did that thing Frenchmen do with their eyebrows raised and the corners of their mouths turned down. Hang on. He nodded. Ground out his cigarette in the ashtray, looked into my eyes and spoke. He said, "I was here." Translated, that is, I was here. I felt. That's the expression. Something. And perhaps I was not alone. Think about it. That is what gives me hope. Perhaps we are not alone. And that brings me back to Julian Assange.
Yeah.
Julian Assange reminds me that I am not alone. Because in fact, without Julian Assange, we might as well be alone. Without a free press, we might as well be alone. Without basic human rights, for all our brothers and sisters all over the world, irrespective of their colour, religion or nationality, we might as well all be alone. That is why we are standing shoulder to shoulder outside the British Embassy in New York City alongside our brother Julian Assange. So Julian, thank you for standing up to the man on our behalf these last 10 years. You are not alone here today on 2nd Avenue, New York, and neither are we. We are many, and we have a message for Vanessa Bereza, that apology for a magistrate that sent you down in that kangaroo court in London. Miss Bereza, you are a disgrace to the legal profession. When I spoke in London in Parliament Square back in February 2020, I wasted a few words on Boris Johnson in Parliament. He ignored the law and did the bidding of his masters in Washington. Today, the current pitiful British poodle, Rishi Sunak, is equally well-trained and biddable. What about the law, Mr. Sunak? What about Magna Carta? What about basic human rights, Mr. Sunak? Last week there was a glimmer of light from the mainstream media. The New York Times, Le Monde, the Guardian, Der Spiegel and El País published an open letter in support of dropping some of the charges against Julian. Welcome to the party, guys! Where the have you been all these years? All these years when your colleague, Julian Assange, needed you, where were all your editorials exhorting the people to take to the streets in their millions before the dungeon doors slammed shut on free speech forever? I sincerely hope your half-assed letter is not just a whimper to cover your own sorry asses. I hope so. We shall see. There are others here to... I've nearly finished. There are others here to speak. So in conclusion, I'll just remind all interested parties, especially the executive branch of the government of the United States of America, Joe Biden et al., and also all members of Congress, to some advice my mother gave to me when I was just a young teenager. She said, Roger, you will have many important decisions to make during your lifetime. When you do, I advise you to, above all, do your research thoroughly. Do all the reading, listen to all opinions, especially opinions that differ from your own. If you're thorough and turn over every rock, you will have done all the heavy lifting. The next bit of the process is easy. So what's the easy bit, Mum? You just do the right thing.
Yeah.
So Joe, come on, brother. For once in your life, do
The right thing!
Free
Julian Assange!
Would you please welcome Max Blumenthal from the Grayzone?
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, thank you, Randy. Can't thank you enough. You're a soldier. I will speak louder. I'll speak louder. I was hearing some babbling around the outskirts. I don't know. Was President Biden here? Everyone's trying to take my coffee. Yeah. I'm glad everyone stayed after Roger Waters and Ben Cohen for the little people. Just a humble editor of a website that was just declared by Wikipedia to be far left and far right at the same time. We'll talk about that in a second, because it does relate. I came in last night, had dinner with an old friend, a not political friend, and he brought his apolitical girlfriend who brought her apolitical corporate friends. Very nice people. I mean, great people. And after 2 hours of talking about themselves, they asked me what I was doing in New York. And I said, I'm speaking at a rally for Julian Assange. And they just drew a blank. They said, who the hell is Julian? Julian Lennon, Julian who? Julius Irving? They didn't know who Julian Assange was. And these are people that are highly educated. And they have been betrayed. No, it's not their fault. And when I told them who Julian Assange was, and that he is being literally tortured and has been in solitary confinement for 1,000 days and more for exposing official corruption and the crimes of our national security state, they were horrified, and you could actually see tears in their eyes when they learned that he was also a father and a husband who has been deprived of holding his children simply because he told the truth about our national security state. We have an entire population to reach here. Most people do not know who Julian Assange is, and that's why this work is so important. Now I'll tell you about another event I went to earlier this year in Los Angeles. Some of you might not like it from the lockdown left, but it was at a rally to defeat the mandates. Yeah. Those of you who don't like it, it's irrelevant. We all need to get along. We need to get over these divisions from the pandemic. And I'm sorry you got mad at me, but I'm not mad at you. I'm sorry you fell for the psyop. But I was just there. I was just there to explain how I thought that the lockdowns and the health passports were creating a digital dystopia. And when I said that Julian Assange had warned about this for years, before I even called for his freedom, this right-leaning crowd got on its feet and cheered immediately for the freedom of Julian Assange. And it was an amazing moment. Now why? 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 Because they watch stuff like Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson has had Roger Waters on repeatedly to advocate for Julian Assange. It's crazy. We're living in an upside-down world right now where the Fox News network that was clamoring for the war in Iraq is now presenting space for people to advocate for the freedom of Julian Assange. And so there's an opportunity there. Randy really wants my coffee. But who are the people that we have the hardest time trying to talk to about this? It's the progressives, the liberals, the MSNBC watchers, the people who read legacy media. We call them libs now, but these are educated people who read the New York Times and the Washington Post, and they don't realize the Washington Post is owned by one of the world's richest men who is a contractor for the CIA, who hosts the CIA's cloud at his Amazon. They don't realize that, and they are hostile to Julian Assange. So, the people who support the Patriot Act. So that the mainstream media has become an enemy of the journalist, the most courageous publisher and journalist of our time. And I always tell this story. I always tell this story about the piece that I published that Randy mentioned at the Grayzone about how the CIA was running an operation to surveil Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy. They had taken over the security through UC Global, and so everyone who came in through the front door to visit Julian, they thought they were speaking to an Ecuadorian security guard. It was in fact a CIA asset who would take their devices, open their devices, invade their devices, and then send it back to Langley. So who were some of those people? Some of those people were reporters for these same publications that have demonized Julian Assange, painting him as a Russian spy and so on. One of them was Ellen Nakashima, the chief national security correspondent for the Washington Post. I published photos of her devices that were opened by CIA assets at UC Global. Just to restate that, the chief national security correspondent for the Washington Post had her devices infiltrated by the CIA. Now, can you imagine if the Russian FSB did that? What would have happened? There would have been headlines on every mainstream publication. I went to the Washington Post. I went to Ellen Nakashima. I said, do you have any comment on this? Do you have anything to say about this? No. Silence. Crickets. Not a damn thing, because they can't bite the hand that feeds them. They are coward. No, they're worse than cowards. They are the voice of the national security state that Julian Assange exposed. They are the stenographers for our secret government, and they betrayed Julian Assange. So a letter recently came out. Thank you to the New York Times publisher Arthur Sulzberger for participating in this letter. Several mainstream legacy publications called for the U.S. to drop the Espionage Act charges against Julian Assange. Finally, years later, They finally did this. The New York Times was the only American publication to sign that letter. No LA Times, no Chicago Tribune, no Washington Post, no Wall Street Journal, no Associated Press, no Reuters, because they are the stenographers for the national security state. They are worse than cowards. They are part of the crimes that Julian Assange exposed. Julian Assange asked, what is the average death count for every Western journalist? And that is a question we need to continue to ask today. Those people know that they will never be on the hook. They will never face punishment, as Julian Assange did, because they will never do what he did. But those of us who do, and we do this at the Grayzone, if you read anything Kit Clarenberg published recently about the British national security state, British intelligence, we continue to do this. There is a target on our back because of what is happening to Julian Assange. And so we are fighting not only for the right of Julian Assange to hold his children and be with his wife, we're fighting for the right to expose the secret government, the national security state, the Central Intelligence Agency, which has a $90 billion or more black budget, which has infested Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms with its former agents. And we see Garland Nixon here is banned from Twitter. I thought Elon Musk was exposing censorship. National security state contractor Elon Musk, I thought he was exposing censorship. He said only the right is censored. Well, why are anti-imperialists like Garland Nixon censored? Why are they suspended? Why? Why isn't he leaking the files about that? Why isn't he leaking the files about Russiagate? Why isn't he leaking the files about everyone who criticized the Ukraine proxy war being suspended? Why has Elon Musk not restored the Twitter account of Julian Assange? Can we at least free Julian Assange's Twitter account? So I want to close by reading an email from Julian Assange. Hi all, I'm in Iceland. You should be too, or at least reporting about it. I've been in Iceland the past few weeks advising parliamentarians here on a cross-party proposal to turn Iceland into an international journalism haven, a jurisdiction designed to attract organizations into publishing online from Iceland by adopting the strongest press and source protection laws from around the world. In my role as Wikileaks editor, I've been involved in fighting off many legal attacks. To do that and keep our sources safe, we have had to spread assets, encrypt everything, and move telecommunications and people around the world to activate protective laws and national jurisdictions. It goes on, but he says, that's why I'm excited about what is happening in Iceland, which has started to see the world in a new way after its mini-revolution a year ago. That was February 2010, and today Julian Assange has been captured. And he was captured because he was, and he's being tortured because he was leading a revolution in journalism. And that's why. Not because he violated some Espionage Act. So it's our job today to continue that revolution, to continue the revolution that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks started, and to see Julian Assange standing here with us and his family to see that revolution through. Thank you.
Yeah.